Now, before we get talking too much about what I'm doing on the workbench here, I need to talk about one thing that's kind of important. I've said this before, and I guess I keep needing to say it because I get a lot of questions about this. But I do not have a 3D printer. I do not want a 3D printer. 3D printers are great for the hobby. Absolutely great. They're great for all kinds of hobbies, all kinds of stuff. But they're just not for me. If I were to own a 3D printer, quite frankly, my hobby would not be model railroading. My hobby would be 3D printing. So with that said, everything I do is going to be scratch built. I will buy 3D printed parts. In fact, you'll see that I bought 3D printed trucks. And I'll buy all kinds of other stuff that's 3D printed. Just that I don't have one, don't want one. Thank you very much. Okay, let's get onto the bench and I want to talk about a couple of things. Now, this has been a discussion of some of my updates before, that I have a limited number or a limited amount of rolling stock for the narrow gauge part of the railroad. What you see here is my actually my first narrow gauge rolling stock, and this was a kit, and I think this was from this Mount Blue Model Company, and yeah, Mount Blue Model Company, and this was the SR and RL series or 70 series 20-foot box car. Or 28-foot, pardon me, 28-foot box car. And nice kits. They have a whole bunch of kits, as probably some of you are aware, that do narrow gauge. And they are a very nice kit. They don't come with a lot of the stuff. You know, they don't come with the trucks or the couplers, but they come with a lot of the other pieces and parts necessary to do this. The only thing I didn't like about this is well, I like the 28-foot, but I didn't like the height. And I know this is a prototype. It's from a real box car, model after a real box car, but the height of it just bothered me. And so one of the things I did, and again I've discussed this previously, is I created 2 more box cars. And what I did with them is I made them just a slightly taller. And not, they're a little bit wider, not much wider, but a little bit wider and a little bit taller. And I made these more like 6 foot or 8 foot wide, I think it is. Let's see here. Yeah, these are 6 feet wide. And in the center, I think they're like 7 feet tall, 7 or 8 feet tall. And for me, this looks a little bit better and works better on my railroad. It's still, narrow gauge. It's still, I shortened up the wheelbase. I think these are shortened up the length. I think this is a 26 foot instead of 28. Maybe it's 24. Yeah, 24 foot box car. And I like the 24 foot and shorter on my railroad. I don't have a lot of narrow curves on this layout on Narrow Valley, but original Jody Junction I was going to have some fairly narrow radius curves, and so these were going to work a lot better. But so I created 2 of these box cars, and then I created the flat car, and there's a whole video on the flat car, on what I did with the flat car and why I did and whatever. And then I also came along and I created a caboose. Now, the thing is all of these cars, the caboose included, are all made from wood. Started out with wood, and I'm used to using wood. Was my preferred method, modeling method is using wood. A lot of my structures were wood. And then I got to started watching Boomer Diorama, and he started talking about using more and more plastic. He does a lot of the plastic stuff, and it got me interested in looking into plastic. So several of my buildings are plastic, I thought, okay, well, these are all wooden cars, and they're wood-side cars, and that's great, and everything's wood. But if I slightly update it to come into, my modeling era is around between 1950 and 1955. Even then, many narrow gauge railroads would have shifted over to steel cars, steel frame, and etc. So then I decided it's time to start working with plastic. So I've started coming up with some things that I need to do, making plastic framed cars and plastic rolling stock. All right, well, one of the first things I did to start converting over from the wood to plastic is I made a new drawing using the pieces that I'll use for the plastic chassis. The wood pieces and the plastic pieces aren't the exact same size, so there's some other work that has to be done, shimming and otherwise. So, but anyway, I have this, and after a bunch of experimentation and playing around, this is basically my final product. I start off with 30,000 sheet that is a frame base for the chassis, and then for the side pieces, side runner or the beams, I'm using 80 thousandths, and it's on a 30 thousandths plate. The bolster beams are also 80 thousandths by a quarter of an inch wide. So 80 thousandths, 80 thousandths, 80 thousandths, 30 thousandths plate. And then the length is dependent upon what size of car I want, what kind of rolling stock I want. Caboose, boxcar, flat car, gondola, whatever. So then I start from there, going with the trucks, two different kinds of trucks, and what screws I'm going to be using. And so basically what we ended up with is this is a starting point. That's the chassis, just bare bones chassis, nothing added to it yet, nothing fancy, just the bare bones chassis. The 80 thousandths sheet, or the 30 thousandths, 30 thousandths sheet, the 80 thousandths beams, and the 80 thousandths by 1/4 inch bolster beam. And so then we can go from there. Now, when I start adding trucks and basically trucks and couplers, I start adding some little changes. So let me talk about that a little bit. Okay, so now that I have the basic frame, or basic chassis, to go from there, I start deciding which trucks I'm going to use. Now I have access to two different styles of trucks. Your basic N-scale truck. Now these were taken from a lifelike tank car, and I also have a lifelike box car that I took some trucks from, but they're just basic N-scale trucks. I don't really like them. I don't really care for them because they're shorter and smaller, but in a pinch they'll do, and on some cars they may look okay. So I can go with that for a while until I can replace them. The reason is the other truck I have are these HOn30 trucks that I got from Shapeways. Now these, I like these trucks. As I said, I got them from Shapeways, but unfortunately, Shapeways isn't doing business anymore. Not the kind of business I want. And so I can't get any more of these. And I think right now I may have 8 more of these to use. I'm not sure, but I think I have 8 more. But in case I wanted to do, I'll use these as much as possible. But in case when I run out of these, if I can't find any other, HOn30 scale trucks that I like, I may end up having to go to N scale. And so I did plan on going to N scale trucks. So I did put right up and did some research on what I'm going to do for N scale trucks. Now when I do the N scale trucks, the little mounting pin, the attachment pin, I drill a clearance hole through that and take out that little end of the pin there. I cut that part off. I drill through for a clearance hole, so that will help take up the large gap, and that will fill in. Hard to see, but that will fill in nicely there. So the N scale trucks will work. The other thing that I have is what wheels to use. Now this truck still has the old N scale lifelike trucks on there with the large flange. Not a big fan of that. But the only other trucks that I have access to, or pardon me, wheels that I have access to, are these 33-inch wheels from Intermountain. And I like these. These are good when you're using 33-inch wheels. I also have had some wheels that I've been using from ESM. Thing is when this guy made these, he specified that the best wheel fit, the axle length, is 540 thou. Some of these are a little bit wider than that, and they do seem to work. They just don't roll as freely. For example, my favorite wheels were from Fox Valley, and these were the VFM 3602 36-inch wheels with a 553 axle, and these are 33. I like the 36-inch wheels, but I don't seem to be able to find any more of these. I think the last time I checked, Pfeiffer Hobbies may still have some of these, but I can't find this number on the Fox Valley website, so I don't know if they're making these anymore or not. But so anyway, that's another little dilemma. But 33-inch wheels work great. No problem with them on using the two different trucks, the N scale truck or the HOn30 truck. They work fine. So that's not a big deal. Okay, so the next thing to discuss is what I'm going to do for couplers and coupler boxes. Now in the past, and with the wooden ones, everything has worked out really great, and I'm going to continue using that same method. So what I have is a choice between two. I have the universal body mount from Microtrains, and I like these. I started out using these Microtrains couplers, and then I decided I really didn't like them. They were too much of a hassle for me. So I converted over to a different coupler, but I'm still using the boxes, the coupler boxes. So in this case, this is the universal, and they're the black, and they have a longer tab on the square piece, and there's a longer nose tab coming out here. That's the difference between this and the next one I'm going to show that I'm going to use. But this is the universal body mount, medium shank couplers. And then the next ones that I use are the brown universal body mount short shank couplers. And those are the brown body, and they have a shorter, also have that shorter nose piece. I use both of them. And I've use them both, mix and match, doesn't matter. I like both of them. I like the brown ones better because they have the shorter piece sticking out, but the black ones work well too. And as I said, I don't use the Microtrains couplers themselves. What I have done is I have converted all of my rolling stock over to using the Bachmann Easy Mate. I guess it's the Mark II. Yeah, Easy Mate Mark II. I like these couplers. They have a plastic spring to them that works really well. They come all put together, and the only trick that I've found is that you got to make sure that the nub on the back is cleaned off if you're going to mount anything behind the box. If you mount anything behind the box here, let's see, if you mount anything behind the box here, then you need to make sure that the nub on this is cleaned off, and the nub on the coupler is cleaned off. And also the spring on this, let me pull this one up here. You can focus on this. There's kind of hard to see it. It's not focusing well on it, but the spring sticks out of the box a little bit there, and you do not want to block that right there. You don't want to block that thing. And not sure that's really going to focus on it, but little spring right there. You don't want to block that from action. But so this is one that's temporarily double-sided taped in place with a shim. So let's talk about that stuff next. Okay, when mounting the two different trucks to the chassis, with the narrow gauge trucks, the shim A is not required for either of these. There is no shim required underneath the truck, between the truck and the bolster beam. Now on the narrow gauge, there is a 40 thousandths shim is required, and all I do is take a 40 thousandths shim and drill a proper hole for it and set it in place, and there we go. Okay, so on the narrow gauge, using the narrow gauge trucks, a 40 thousandths shim is required at that position right there. Now on the wheel size, depending upon the wheels, 36-inch wheels, a 10 thousandths shim is required underneath the coupler. So I place a 10 thousandths shim right there, no shim. So a 10 thousandths shim for the coupler, bolster goes on there, or the truck goes on, 10 thousandths shim, then the coupler. For the narrow gauge, or for the end scale, it's funny, 33-inch, the 40 thousandths shim, no shim required for the coupler for that. 36-inch wheel, I found that a 20 thousandths shim is required here. Okay, so that's the shimming for different trucks and different couplers. And that's what I have here. I have the end scale truck. These are 36-inch wheels, and I have the 20 thousandths shim right here for the 36-inch wheel. And then again, the placement of the trucks, the distance between here, from the front edge or leading edge of the chassis to the hole here, depends upon how I want to place this truck. If I want it back a ways, or if I want to move it forward a little ways. And I found that the best distance is somewhere between 535 thousandths to 600 thousandths for the end scale. And that's basically it. So after all of that, doing all that, I have an end scale truck-based chassis here, pretty much ready to go. This is a 24-footer, all set. All I got to do is take off the tape here, glue the box on, and that's one of the things I do is I glue the box on. I don't use screws on this. There's not enough meat on the 30 thousandths to go through, and in some cases there may be something very thin going on top of here, maybe wood planking, or maybe nothing, so this gets covered over. So when I'm adhering the box, which is I'm not sure which kind of plastic it is, but it's dissimilar plastic. So I have this kind of plastic and this kind of plastic, and so what I use to adhere those, what I found is the best, is this Teslar's liquid cement for plastic models. This stuff works really good with these dissimilar plastic materials. So I use that to glue the box on. And again, I'm only gluing the bottom part of the box that has the wings on the side. The wings on the side. That way, if I need to change coupler, I can pop it off. This guy stays glued to the chassis, and then I just put the coupler in and snap the cap on it, and that works pretty well. That's the way all of my other cars are done. This is just glued in, not screwed in. Screws. Let's talk about screws. As I mentioned before, the screws I'm using are the 0-80 by 1/2 inch brass screws, and you want to make sure you get some good quality screws. The other option you have is 172 screws. Now they're slightly bigger in diameter, but they're not so much bigger in diameter that they won't work in this place. In fact, I found that the hole here is very, very close to a clearance hole for the 172 screws. So you can use 172 screws. Now these screws I bought from, I'm pretty sure it was Granger. They have a good line of machine screws, and they have good heads. These are, the heads on these screws are really good screws. They're a good machine screw. As are the screws that I got from Walthers. So that's screws, that's trucks, that's the chassis. Now from this point on, this is a basic chassis, and I can go anywhere I want from here, adding whatever I want, adding the under chassis details. You know, the sky's the limit here. Once I get this basic thing going, I can do whatever I want, depending upon what I build on top of it. So you know, that'll be the next thing I have to decide. Once I get these chassis built, then I'll decide what I'm going to build on top of them, what I need. And that'll be examining what I'm going to do for industry on the narrow valley layout, and then I can go from there. Well, I hope you found that useful. If nothing else, it's a good video log for me to go back and go, what did I say? What did I do? How am I doing things? If you like this, you know, give me a comment. If nothing else, just give me a comment. Let me know what you think. I do appreciate the comments. Subscribe if you want. It's free. And thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.